I've been very fortunate to meet deaf people all over the world. I had an opportunity to have tea with a deaf person in the slums, and then right around the corner from that, I encountered a deaf-owned hotel. I had the opportunity to go to China and meet deaf sign language researchers there, as well as meet a deaf person who established a business, massage business. I even met a deaf person and had dinner with her and spoke to someone, and I said, "Do you think I'm wrong for stealing?" I was asked that question. I had the opportunity to meet a deaf family in their home in China. And when I went in, the father told me that he works making toilet seats. And he explained how he worked so hard in a factory, and he was so proud because he was able to provide the necessary support to raise his family. I was so touched. I had the opportunity in Kenya where I met a deaf woman. And she runs an HIV/AIDS clinic serving deaf and hearing people both. And it's such an important issue because many people don't realize they have the infection, and she's working hard on this terrible situation. Tanzania, which is near Kenya, I had the opportunity to meet this deaf man. He was born in an area where when a baby was born, if they were deaf, they were discarded and left to die. And this man was fortunate that he wasn't one of those victims. And as a result, he decided to do some outreach into the local communities and teachers saying, deaf people are the same as hearing, that they can be educated, that they can be productive members of the community. All these countries that I've had the opportunity to go to, while the local deaf community faced barriers, I've been exposed to some of their dreams, their passions, their wishes. It's been a wonderful experience for me. So discovering Deaf Worlds, DDW, my organization, our approach is to work with the local deaf communities in terms of capacity building. We sign it CB. When working with deaf leaders, we want to make sure that they have the necessary skills, not just to overcome the barriers that are there, but also to deal with a variety of situations to find possible solutions. Let me share an example of this with you. Say you're building a house and you have a hammer, and so you start putting the house up and you get the first floor in, the second floor in, and you move on to working in the bathroom and trying to do the plumbing. Well, the hammer doesn't serve you well. So what we do in a similar way is that we work with local deaf communities on enhancing their toolbox. Not to just have one tool, one skill, but a myriad of tools and skills to handle the situations they find themselves in. Another part of capacity building is to ask the right questions. Let me share an example with you. This man here was running an HIV/AIDS clinic. That's the clinic you see on the slide. We met this man and had, a good conversation with him. And at the end of the conversation, he asked if we might have $10,000 to donate for his cause. We didn't say no, that it was a ludicrous request. $10,000 was not a formal amount, but within that hour, that was his request. He wanted to, come up with $10,000 to serve his cause. So we decided to ask him further, what's the purpose behind getting $10,000? So we had a very interactive discussion to find out what his needs were. And in the end, we collaborated, and we got together with a group of people, wrote a paper that outlined the need for the local deaf community suffering from HIV and AIDS. They needed a new clinic. And so they sent that letter to a construction company, a local construction company, explaining their situation. Because, when construction companies do a project, there's always leftover remnants that weren't used in the construction process. They were asking for their donations. Now, this idea was one that they came up with, but it was a result of that interactive discussion, helping them think about possible solutions to their issues. That's capacity building. And anyone can apply the idea of capacity building, having the right mindset, the right attitude. And today, I want to talk about capacity building, working with young deaf people. We all know that we're a minority culture, a linguistic minority culture, a small one. But we face, these barriers in society, whether it's racism, discrimination, we face that all the time, and it won't be resolved on its own. We have to take up the cause to work on overcoming these barriers. And I believe that capacity building is an approach that can be very effective. And we need to teach our young deaf people this idea. We're all well aware of this statistic. And as a result of this, deaf people become delayed in language acquisition, maturation, social maturation. And so we need to have more deaf leaders develop confidence in young deaf people. And the way you do this is sharing your skills, your experience, mentoring our young deaf people, having them learn from you and know that they can be leaders in tomorrow's generation. Building bridges, making those connections. Maybe I don't have a necessary skill to resolve some issue, but if I don't have it, maybe there are resources within the community that you can tap into to make those connections, to overcome some of the barriers that we all face. This is so key to lead the way. And again, as I mentioned before, asking the right question. You might be presented with an idea that seems a little far-fetched at first, but asking the right questions can lead to solutions, to figure out a way to work collaboratively on overcoming these barriers. Once again, inspire. So many wonderful things happen in the world. And hearing the stories of others allows us to dream big and to be inspired. We need to become involved. Deaf clubs, schools for the deaf, nonprofit organizations, the NAD, all these different organizations. We need people to volunteer, to show their support, to be a resource, to open your mind to getting involved. Invest in the future. If you're a stock market player, you have real estate, you have to invest wisely in those areas. In a similar way, with our young deaf people, we need to take the time, spend the energy to invest in our young deaf people so that we can be successful together. Thank you all.